Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Neutral News Network. I'm Brian, joined alongside Zach today. Jake is not available today, and that's quite all right. But we decided to go ahead and have an episode regardless. So Zach is going to be my tag team friend here, and we will tackle this all together with y'all. So without further ado, let's go ahead and crack into some good old-fashioned ground news, and we will go ahead and go to the economics section.
We're doing great. We're off to a hot start.
Hey,
Everything worked right up until it didn't. There, all better. Except for you. It's fine.
I kind of like...
Go on.
It's all good. Hey, we are not AAA production value here, folks.
You're darn right.
Until somebody wants to Venmo us $1 million, that might not change. But anyways, yeah, so first things first. On the left there, you can see California to sue in order to stop Trump from imposing sweeping tariffs. California is one of the largest state, and they most likely have a lot of goods that are directly from China and vice versa. Therefore, the state is probably feeling the brunt of the economic tariffs the most compared to the majority of the states in the union. Next, Trump tariffs highly that the United States have. We've talked about this in previous episodes, talking about how tariffs are inflationary. talking about what the Fed is going to try and do to combat that inflation should that arise. So you can see that obviously this is really starting to tick up. I mean, we've been talking about the trade war for quite some time now, and it definitely has no sign of stopping anytime soon. And then, last but not least, Trump says he wants to give money and airplane tickets to immigrants who self-deport. Um, this goes against a lot of his hardline stances on immigrants, kind of giving them the opportunity to deport themselves, where he is, as everyone's probably seen in the news as of late, has been deporting individuals quite rapidly, I would say, to the surprise and shock of many folks. Um, but that's kind of going to be our subject today. Actually, if you want to click on that article, Zach, I just want to read into that a little bit more. So, states he wants to provide money and airplane tickets to immigrants who choose to self-deport, provide airfare and a stipend. Its program would include financial assistance for self-deportation, a way to re-enter the U.S. legally. See, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I wish I could get a plane ticket and a stipend, but I guess since I'm a citizen, I don't get that. Dang it. Um, but yeah, so that point down at the bottom, this point marks a deviation from Trump's usual hardline stance on immigration. I would agree with that. Definitely not something that I was expecting at all. Um, but regardless, that kind of leads us into our subject today. Which is there anything you wanted to talk about in regards to that, Zachary, before we get started on covering that?
No, not about that particular topic.
Okay. You still have your end of show topic ready to go?
Absolutely not. But we'll get
Oh,
there somewhere
no,
between now and then. We'll get there. Don't worry.
we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I love it. All right. I'm pulling up the stream as well, just in case anybody comments in the chat. But yeah, outside of that, let's go ahead and cruise over to our first article, if you can.
Which one? Because I don't know that they're in order anymore.
Yeah, they probably aren't in order. Let's get let's go with the let's go with the Missoulian,
Got it.
which is what a name. Missoulian? Is that how you say
I,
Missoulian?
Missoulian is what I would think.
I'm guessing this is a newspaper um, in Missouri. If I had to guess, if I had to throw out a wag. Oh no! Oh, Missoula. Oh, okay. This is Missoula, Montana.
Oh,
Okay, not my first guess.
all right.
Where your story lives. But yeah. So yeah, just I guess some background. I'm sure everybody at some point has heard about this case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He is an individual who was in the United States legally at the time of his deportation, and um, he was deported to a place called, I believe it's Seacot, which is a maximum security prison in El Salvador. And many people on the left are using the term disappeared simply because he was detained by ICE agents. Excuse me, I have to cough. He was detained by ICE agents, then taken to a immigration facility where he was then processed and then deported to El Salvador, to which he was then taken to this prison facility.
Yeah, and real
Um,
quick, that prison facility, they call it El Salvador's Center for Terrorism Confinement, or so CCOT. So, uh,
CCOT, I was
yep,
close.
yep. So, it is a maximum security prison, so it's a pretty hardcore place.
Actually, I sent you a link for this, Zachary. We can actually pull it up now, just that way people can get a grasp of kind of where this is and what it looks like. Yeah, so go ahead and zoom into that. So this is in El Salvador, and this is what
Oh, good
the
God.
prison facility looks like. And I think you zoomed in a little too much. But you can obviously see this is not your mom and dad's prison. I mean, we have one that's fairly close to myself in London, Ohio, that's a maximum security prison, and it doesn't even look quite like this. So this is the real deal. This is quite a Large prison, I believe. The official capacity for it is 40,000 individuals, and yeah, it is not a place where you would want to find yourself at any point ever. There are plenty of videos, pictures, and etc. from this facility. I would encourage you to look them up. That way you can get a better understanding on this facility and what goes on in there, which, I will say is still quite secretive, I would say, for the most part. Like what truly goes on there. A lot of the stuff that you see is obviously stuff that has been recorded and approved for release by the El Salvadorian government. So just keep that in mind when you are reviewing some of that video on this facility.
Yeah, and as we'll
But all right,
discuss a little bit later, it's kind of a very controlled access kind of thing where they don't just let anyone in there.
correct. Which, yeah, we'll get into something that is slightly concerning. And again, going to try and keep this episode as neutral as possible. It's remember we're doing our best to explain facts here. Um, just because a fact does not necessarily agree with your political opinion does not mean that it is not neutral. If it is a fact, then it is a fact. Um, and if we are proven wrong on that fact, then that's perfectly fine. Then I guess it wasn't a fact. But, please cite your sources if you're going to try and prove us wrong. That's all I ask. All right. So back to that article. Um, so obviously, um, this deportation without due process, which is the main problem that is really uh, got a lot of individuals on the opposing side up in arms. Um, this deportation without due process has been scrutinized multiple times by multiple different judges at this point on the federal level, and it's starting to get to the point where the rubber meets the road. Um, multiple, I believe it's now two judges have uh, issued rulings on this, and the Supreme Court has also ruled on this as well, saying, and I believe this is a quote, that the administration must facilitate the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Um, we could look up that exact quote, but I believe it was a 9-0 ruling, which means that that is obviously a ruling that was determined between all conservative and Democratic Supreme Court justices. Which, yes, there are obviously political sides to the Supreme Court justices. That's very evident, but not a shock. They are appointed by the president, and that president at the time obviously could be leaning one way or the other when making said appointments.
That
However,
exact quote, real quick.
yep.
So they ordered him to, uh, or the Trump administration, to facilitate and effectuate the return of Abrego Garcia to the United States by no later than 11:59 p.m. on Monday, April 7th. So
So
obviously
uh,
that has not happened.
that deadline has passed. So due to this, there is a ruling. One of the rulings was by U.S. District Judge James E. Boasberg, which Donald Trump has spoken out against, calling him, a liberal judge. Actually, a lot of the Trump administration have come out and basically told the judicial system that it is not their place to rule on these matters, which that is not true. There are checks and balances that must be enforced. That's why we have three branches of government, not one. Um, but there is a point, and we are getting close to that point, where the judge is getting close to the point in which they're going to charge the Trump administration with criminal contempt of court. And that you can see in that very front paragraph at the top there. So they found the probable cause, and now I'm not sure. I don't think we've ever seen any situation like this in our lifetimes where we've had a judge, actively um, planning to file criminal contempt of court for not listening to an official judicial order. Um, But you can see down below, Boasberg accused administration officials of rushing deportees out of the country under the Alien Enemies Act, which we covered, a couple weeks ago. Um, so it just it seems like everything we talk about here, Zachary, like in about 2 to 3 weeks, it becomes really relevant. So maybe we should talk about like global peace and unicorns and rainbows and everything like that. I think we might be able to
We might,
change the course of history.
make a few people a little bit happier if we went that route.
Right. But yeah, so at the bottom, the judge warned he could hold hearings and potentially refer the matter to prosecution if the administration does not act to remedy the violation. Um, yeah, if the Justice Department does not prosecute the matter, Boasberg said he will appoint another attorney to do so. Which again, I believe, and I've been seeing a lot of stuff on, and Zachary, feel free to look this up. I've been seeing a lot of um, stories that say that the way that the district judge can enforce this criminal contempt can be by calling upon the federal marshals. And I'm not sure if that's something that the Supreme Court has to do or if that's something that the district court has to do, regardless of the matter, because technically, the courts do have domain over the federal marshals, again, from what I've read. And the problem is, though, is that Trump has appointed the individual who oversees the federal marshals. So there's definitely going to be a tussle of power that goes on within that. Um, but this isn't something that I say lightly. But this 9-0 ruling that obviously was not adhered to by 4/7 at midnight. Um, I mean, this really brings into the conversation the term constitutional crisis, because you've got a administration that is openly defying a Supreme Court order, um, and quite brazenly. Now, this is not confirmed by any way stretch of the imagination, but there's been rumors that have floated around that Kilmar Abrego Garcia has died, and that is why they cannot facilitate his return. However, none of that has been stated, none of that's been said. So there's so many moving parts to this, and we know that a lot of people can have questions about this. I mean, it's a very complex issue. That's why we're bringing it to people's attention if you haven't heard about it, and if you have heard about it, feel free to ask us specific questions that you want to know, and obviously we can look those up right here, right now, um, and walk everybody through it. But yeah, so if you scroll down a little bit more on that article, Zachary, you can see the a photo of inside the facility, and you can see individuals, obviously shaved head, all sitting in lines together. Um, and this is from March 16th, I believe, and we'll kind of get into this, but I believe this is right around the time that Kirsty Nome was in the facility, uh, taking photos after individuals were deported there. I believe that brought up I think we brought up this a couple weeks ago with that flight that was taken down there, and the judge ordered them to return, and they did not return. I believe that's the other court proceeding that's going on as well, that has ordered remediation ordered remediation from the Trump administration. So, but you can see right beneath this, if you scroll down a little bit more, it's a quote by Boasberg. It says, "The Constitution does not tolerate willful disobedience of judicial orders, especially by officials of a coordinate branch who have sworn an oath to uphold it." Um, so obviously, just in any other sense, the Trump administration has a right to appeal these rulings by the judge. That's something that they're allowed to do, um, and that's perfectly within the realm of normal proceedings. However, if that appeal is not ongoing, then until and unless that appeal has been filed, you have to follow the court order. And then if the appeal is ongoing, as far as I know, I could be wrong, but as far as I know, then that whole process goes on hold. Um, but scrolling down a little bit, or actually, Zachary, you're already on it. It says, going back to what we said earlier, administration officials repeatedly criticized judges. This is the Trump administration, for reining in the president's actions, and Chief Justice John Roberts, who has sided with the president, but is kind of seen as more of a moderate conservative judge, not a moderate liberal, but more of a moderate conservative judge, has been saying, impeachment is not an appropriate response to a disagreement concerning judicial decisions, and that's what he means in regards to the Trump administration calling for the impeachment of Judge Boasberg. So,
And we got a question. Morgan asks, "What happens if he did die uh, in the prison down there?"
so I would imagine, and again, that's a phenomenal question. I think that it will then turn into instead of facilitating the return of him, obviously returning his remains. Um, but at that point, I think that there would probably be some individuals, I would assume, that would be found there that could be found criminally liable for his death. Again, it's tough to say. This is really uncharted waters. Um, but I would imagine that if he dies there, they are, in a sense, permanently unable to facilitate his return. Therefore, they are going to be in contempt of the judicial order. So I don't know how that works, like from a legalese standpoint, but I could definitely see that could um, cause some major headaches for the Trump administration if he has passed away there. Which, if that is the case, I could see potentially why they have not given a status update on him at all. All right, sorry, I'm heading back to the article as well. Um, so down below it says the judge warned he could hold hearings and potentially refer the matter for prosecution if the administration does not act to remedy the violation. Yeah, so in regards to that, I believe um, there has been multiple situations now that have man, I'm trying to find a way to trying to find a way to put this in a way that's not overly biased, I suppose. Um, but let's just say like the judges are, as of right now, because I believe there are two judges, the judges are doing what they can to try and get answers out of anyone they can. And the current administration is being very tight-lipped about what they are telling these judges, and that's not flying with them. So a little bit farther down, I think it says judge did not say which official or officials could be held in contempt. He gave the government until April 23rd to explain the steps it had taken to remedy the violation, or instead identify the individual or people who made the decision to not turn the planes around. So I believe this is so just Judge Boasberg is more in line with the planes of immigrants that were sent back. I do believe um, there is a separate judge specifically for Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Um, and where and I do want to point this out. The administration, and this is a quote, yeah, so right beneath that, Zachary, the one that you have highlighted. In a separate case, the administration has acknowledged wrongfully deporting Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the El Salvador prison, but does not intend to return him to the United States, despite the Supreme Court ruling that the administration must facilitate his release. Yeah, so the judge in the case said she is determining whether to undertake contempt proceedings, saying officials appear to have done nothing to aid in Abrego Garcia's release from custody and return to the United States, which I believe she's already got two or three depositions that she is demanding from certain individuals in border control and customs, and also I believe ICE as well.
Yeah, and
Um,
the judge, I believe the judge you're referring to would be the judge for the U.S. District Court, Paula Zenas. I don't know if that's
oh yeah,
butchering
yeah,
her
it
last
starts with an
name.
X.
Yeah, yep,
Yeah,
Xinis. But
yep,
that would be
yeah. I would
who's
say
kind of
Zenas is a good
spearheading
guess.
his specific case here.
Yeah, okay. And then a little bit further down in this article, we get into kind of what we want to talk about with, you saying that there was controlled. access. So obviously, if you scroll up, you can see his face. So Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, or Hollen, whichever way it is pronounced, um, he actually flew down to El Salvador today. This all happened today. He flew down to El Salvador, where he um, met with the country's vice president to try and push for the release of Abrego Garcia, and he did not obviously facilitate the release of this individual, nor did he get a confirmation of wellness from this individual as well. Um, so Van Hollen, he's a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he has, you know, taken the mantle on trying to get this individual home, mostly because he's a Maryland senator. This individual was residing in Maryland. Um, and you can see his quote: "Why is the government of El Salvador continuing to imprison a man where they have no evidence that he's committed any crime, and they have not been provided any evidence from the United States that he has committed any crime?" Um, quote: "They should just let him go." I mean, why is a person who's never committed a crime in a prison, especially a maximum security prison to hold terrorists? So, um, now a little bit farther, President of El Salvador, Neb Bukele, he was in the Oval Office speaking with Trump, and they said they have no basis to send him back, despite the Supreme Court order. Um, now, there there is documentation, because on this next paragraph down here below, I want to preface this. There is documentation. Um, it says, that's the one that says Trump officials claim, that one at the very top of the screen. Trump officials claim Abrego Garcia, a Salvadorian citizen who was living in Maryland, has ties to the MS-13 gang, but his attorneys say the government provided no evidence of that, and Abrego Garcia disputed the claim and has never been charged with any crime. Now, this news article does a very good job of describing a very overall baseline of what was in the court documents that I was able to find. Which, Zachary, if you just want to pull those up and put the link in the chat, we don't have to go through them all, but yeah. So this is the court filings for um, a group of individuals who were suspected of gang-related activity in Maryland, and Abrego Garcia was involved in this incident. Um, but I do want to mention that on this sheet, it does say that he has never been charged with any crime. They did not find him guilty of a crime when he was there. But they did say, from whoever was the source, that they could verify that he had ties to the MS-13 gang. He had a nickname in the MS-13 gang, which was uh, Chele, I believe. Um, and that equals, this is just Chat GPT Googling it, is light skinned person or blonde. Um, and then they said that he had the rank of Chekeo, which is, again, according to ChatGPT, a probationary member or a lookout. So somebody who's not fully a member yet, but is under observation or in a trial phase. So they might be tasked with proving loyalty, doing surveillance, or committing acts for the gang, but not a member of the gang. Again, this is just from ChatGPT. Um, Now, obviously, this document that you're seeing here stated that he should be removed and he should be deported to El Salvador. Is basically what this document says. Long story short. However, uh, obviously, Abrego Garcia appealed this decision and eventually got to the point where there was there were three decisions that were granted on his appeal, um, and it basically says, hereby ordered. Actually, I'll post this in here too, so you can share it with the gang, Zach. All right, so there's that. But yeah, so at the very bottom it says, "Is hereby ordered that the respondent's application for asylum pursuant to INA 208 is denied." the respondent's application for withholding of removal pursuant to INA 241b3 is granted. That's the big one right there. So the respondent's application for withholding of removal. So that's the reason why he was allowed to stay in the United States legally. Because again, if you want to overrule this appeal, you have to bring him in and have a trial, which was not done here. Due process was not given to this individual. That is the big problem. But you can see also in the last one, the respondent's application for withholding of removal under the Convention Against Torture is denied. And then in the conclusion section above that, the respondent's application for asylum is time barred without exception. However, he has established past persecution based on a protected ground and the presumption of a well-founded fear of future persecution. DHS has not shown that there are changed circumstances in Guatemala that would result in the respondent's life not being threatened, or that internal relocation is possible and reasonable under the circumstances. Therefore, the respondent's application for withholding under the Act is granted. Finally, his CAT claim fails because he has not shown that he would suffer torture. But that's like this is why he was allowed to be in the United States, which you'll find a lot of right-wing news outlets that are saying, he was an MS-13 gang member, this, that, and the other. None of that was corroborated in court. He was never charged with a crime, but he was allowed to stay in the country legally due to this appeal right here. Now, nothing happened during the Biden administration with this individual. You can see this all occurred in 2019. We don't know if there were other appeals that were had, other hearings, or at least I don't know. There might have been, but those haven't been released. And you can see a lot of these were filed in late March, so a lot of these documents haven't been probably easily accessible to the public for very long. But this just goes to show you that everyone is going to spin this story their own way. And we're doing our best here to literally give you the straight up court documents, and I'm reading them off for you, showing you exactly why he was allowed to stay in the United States. And it's that, if you scroll down, Zachary, it's that middle section number 2 right there. That is why he was allowed to stay in the United States. Plain and simple. So, if we go to, let's go back to that article again. So, again, I've heard questionable things said about Bukele and how he runs El Salvador, and I believe he's kind of known as a little dictator by some individuals. That's what he's been called. I'm not calling him that. Um, but you can see that obviously he has a very twisted sense of humor in regards to these individuals. It says hours later, El Salvador President Nayib Bukele announced that the deportees arrived in his country in a social media post, oopsie, too late, above an article referencing Boasberg's order. So, he's actively in defiance to American courts and now to the Supreme Court. But this does seem to not bug the administration in office right now, even though we've done multiple things overseas to facilitate the return of other individuals. I believe the administration facilitated the return of the Tate brothers from Romania, which we could have another long discussion about that.
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah. But yeah, so just wanted to show that the El Salvadorian government does not seem to be willing to assist in this notion. But I do want to point out, the administration admitted that they deported this man due to an administrative error. Again, that is something that they have freely and wholly admitted. Um, I'm just curious, they're really leaning into this MS-13 gang portion, but you can see here, Boasberg at the very top. I think you scroll up a little bit more, Zachary, just a touch more. right there. Yeah. Boasberg, who was nominated for the federal branch by Democratic President Barack Obama, ordered the administration last month not to deport anyone in its custody under the Alien Enemies Act after Trump invoked the 1798 wartime law that he claimed was an invasion by the Venezuelan gang Tren de Agua. So he's using the Alien Enemies Act to target anyone with suspicion to connection to any gang. So I don't know if there was, again, in this administrative error, I don't know if there was an individual with the exact same name who was affiliated with Tren de Agua, or if they are just going off of other gangs. Because if they're going off of other gangs that aren't specifically mentioned in the rationale for the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, I don't know what the legality is on that either. Because me personally, I the United States is opening itself up to a very, very, very slippery slope here. I mean, there have been multiple instances that have been recorded of you know ICE agents going up to people's houses, going up to people's cars, smashing windows, taking them forcibly out of their cars, deporting them that way. There was even an instance that I just saw today where a United States citizen was detained at the border when he was returning from Canada along with his wife. There was a situation where um, an actress from the movie American Pie, I don't know if y'all have heard that, was detained at the Canadian border by American Customs and Border Patrol for 2 weeks, I believe. Um, it's just it's very concerning. It's very concerning that we're doing this um, so freely and without thinking about the repercussion um, to America's image. We're about to be hosting the World Cup next year, um, and frankly, we've already seen tourism shocks from Canada where Canadians are simply not traveling to the United States anymore. Um, we're going to see that from the rest of the world, where I would imagine a lot of European countries aren't going to find themselves traveling to the United States. Um, even if you want to just boil this down, not even from the human rights perspective, and just boil it down from the economics perspective, this is bad for the economy. This is bad for the United States tourism industry. This is bad for people who want to either visit family or they want to start a business in the United States. Why would you, as a foreign national, come to the United States, try and do something when you could run into this situation where you're getting detained by Customs and Border Patrol? It just doesn't make sense to a lot of people, I don't think. So again, we're opening ourselves up to a very, very slippery slope here. So, but you
So,
have anything you wanted to add?
I do have a question for you though, and I don't know
Yes.
uh, if you'll have an answer to this one. So, or if this you were going to talk about this later.
Hmm.
The whole system of checks and balances, right?
Yep.
Um, Three branches of government, all that fun stuff. Obviously, thus far, the executive branch has ignored the judicial branch in terms of returning uh, Mr. Abrego back to the U.S. What power, if any, does Congress have here? What can our lawmakers or Congress do to, assuming they were willing, which is a whole other thing, but what power do they have or steps can they take to also, kind of check the Trump administration uh, in terms of either following the court's orders or something they can do on their own outside of the courts? What can they do?
So believe it or not, I do have an answer for this, or at least I don't know if this is the only thing, but I know one thing they can do for sure, and I believe there's been rumblings about from the Democrats already of doing this. And I know they don't have the votes, but I think that there are probably some Republicans that they could sway at this point. I think there are definitely Republicans who are starting to be like, maybe we're going a bit too far, but I digress. But what they could do is they can find a way to do what Cory Booker did, and they can either filibuster or they can withhold nominations, which Trump has done in the past when it comes to political appointees. If there's a judge that needs to be appointed, the Democrats could potentially step in and block that. If there's a administrative position, I'm throwing it out there, but let's just say the Department of Commerce, right? Let's say the person who is currently at the Department of Commerce steps down. You need to have a congressional hearing in order to nominate a person to fill that spot. So Congress could step in and basically say, hey, until and unless you do this, we are not approving anybody else to go through. So they can step in and they can do that. They could Congress can Congress technically is supposed to be the one that passes the laws, which I want you to see if you can find an image for me. I want you to see executive orders by president. If I can find the um, image, I want to give that to you because we've been seeing this more, I would say more frequently as of late. Trying to find, yeah, so this one right here, and this just shows you executive orders. I guess I should probably send you the link and not just a JPEG. Huh.
I think I got it.
Okay.
Maybe. I don't know what this is gonna do. We'll find out. Oh, it's just aggressively big for some reason.
Okay. But yeah, so you can see obviously they're not counting Trump's second term yet. But you can see if you scroll down a little bit more on that image.
Well, unfortunately, I can't.
Oh, not able to?
No.
Okay. Let me get you this BBC article. And we can find it here. So there's the BBC article, and I will get a count of Donald Trump. How many executive orders has Donald Trump signed? Executive. All right. So as of right now, so let's put this in perspective, kind of as to the fact that we're kind of running a little bit rampant here with the executive branch, because technically, executive orders aren't supposed to be something you just throw around willy-nilly. But you can see that, total and an 8-year presidency, you can probably expect to see around 400 to 300, 300, 400. Yeah, because you can see Obama's at 276, Bush is at 291, and so on and so forth. But Donald Trump has issued 129 so far in his second term. That's almost 2 a day, like 1 to 2 a day, which would put him on pace, obviously, for well over 500 at this rate, which would be the most executive orders, and clearly what we're viewing as recent presidential history. So we are starting to get quite a large spike in executive orders, which, you know, Congress could rein that in by passing laws to nullify the executive orders or do things like that. But right now Congress is obviously controlled by Republicans as well as the Senate. So them doing that would require Republicans to jump ship in a sense. But that is what they could do. I would say quickly if they wanted to put a stop to some of this. Congress could band together and say, hey, we're not appointing anybody until and unless you stop doing this. Again, I don't know if that'll happen, but that's one thing they can definitely do because Congress has to approve of the appointees that the president chooses. Same thing. Same thing if for educational purposes only. If the Supreme Court just disappeared tomorrow, all 9 of those people would have to be appointed by the president but approved by Congress. And until and unless they're filled, they're just empty seats. So that's something that they could step in and do immediately.
All right.
Sound like a plan, Stan?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go to this AP News article, which I like going to these AP News articles because it gives you a live look in at everything that's going on here. So you can see obviously live updates. Judge finds probable cause to hold Trump administration in contempt for violating deportation order. So if you just scroll down, it shows you all the updates. I believe this is like kind of a 12-hour time loop slash scale here. But you can see like the last update was at 7:55, and if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, I believe you get to 7:50 a.m. Yeah, so it's about a 12-hour time scale here. But so I'm going to scroll back up to the top and kind of we'll just kind of go through some of the ones that are related specifically to Abrego Garcia. But yeah, so up at the top, you can see where it says Maryland senator traveled to El Salvador to press for the release. Despite a court order, preventing his deportation, Van Hollen said the government declined to let him visit Abrego Garcia, who was in prison. Yeah, so during that visit, and I guess we can talk about this too because I know you brought it up earlier, Zachary. He wanted to go. The senator wanted to go to that prison in order to uh, kind of view what was going on there and also to get a wellness check on Abrego Garcia to see how he was doing. And the prison denied him access, which is contrary to Christy Nome. See, prison. She was given access to that prison, and you can see here in this image, she is there with additional United States officials, which again I've posted in the chat for you there, Zachary.
Waiting for it to show up.
Yep. There we go. Yep. So you can see, obviously, once Zachary pulls this up, you can see that there are the inmates in the back with her standing up front, with guards, security officials, and other United States officials as well. So they could have let this senator into this prison, and they refused to. So again, concerning, but I don't know what else you can really do, because if they don't provide you access, then there's not much you can do in order to get into this prison, because it is run by a sovereign nation, and you can't just go. I mean, I don't know how the international politics of this all works, but let's just say the federal marshals decided to go and try and retrieve this man. I don't think they can just walk into the prison and just escort him out there. So I don't know how they facilitate the return of this man if El Salvador is not willing to give him back. Which I think that's the big crisis here. But the problem is that the United States courts don't care. They're like, hey, you have to be at least trying to do something to get this man back, and they're not. I think that's the big thing. Like they're like, I believe there's been instances where they said that they haven't heard anything from anyone. There's been no correspondence at all between ICE or Border Patrol and Customs, like, to talk to these judges at all and give them an update as to what is happening. And I think that that's the main point that these federal judges are getting really, quite frankly, pissed off about. Um, and I think it remains to be seen what the Supreme Court says on this. I mean, me personally, I was shocked that the Supreme Court had a 9-0 ruling on something like this. I mean, the Justice Thomas and Alito are very, very, very staunch conservative justices, and they even agreed that this was too far. And it's totally fine if you bring Abrego Garcia back, you put him through a trial, you find him guilty or not guilty, whatever. At the end of the trial, if you determine that he then needs to be deported to El Salvador, that's fine. that is at least due process. That is at least a normal, lawful procedure. That's completely different than snatching somebody up, putting them into an ICE detention facility, and deporting them without any due process. Especially if they have the legal protected status that individual had based upon that court document that we showed you earlier. It doesn't matter that they believed he was part of MS-13. It doesn't matter that they believed that he was part of a gang. A court ruled that he was allowed to stay in the United States. Therefore, if you want to remove him, you either have to challenge that court order, which involves due process. And I want a lot of people to understand, if one person is not provided due process, anyone cannot be provided due process. It can happen to you. Whether you want to believe that, whether you don't want to believe that, like I said, there have been United States citizens who have been detained at the border more often than not recently. And there was a Canadian trying to cross into the United States who was detained for 2 weeks. This again is a very slippery slope. And I want people to understand that this is not normal and it should not be construed as normal. Again, if you want to convict a murderer, you still have to put them through a trial. If you want to convict a serial killer, you still have to put them through a trial. It doesn't matter if they're a legal citizen or if they're an illegal citizen. They are still in the United States. They still have to be processed through United States laws. Full stop. I need people to understand that. That's not a political issue, because anyone can get caught up in a situation where they're not guilty. And if you get caught up in the wrong situation, doesn't matter if you're not guilty or not. If there's no due process, there's no way to prove it. If you got pulled over on the side of the street tomorrow as a United States citizen by ICE and they thought you were an illegal alien, if there's no due process, you get zero chance to prove it.
And I want
Nothing.
to, with what you just said right there. So I believe it is the SAVE Act that's going through Congress right now. I think it's the
Save
yeah.
Act.
So, which among various voter registration things, it may end up causing to happen or whatever. One of those things could end up being your citizenship status would be on your driver's license. So whether legal, illegal, whatever. Think about this if there's no due process anymore. Anybody can have, pull you over for no reason. But I don't know if it's, everybody's state law, but I know it's most states have. If, when you get pulled over, you have to show your license and registration. You don't have to do a lot of other things. Those things you have to do.
Yeah, you've got to stop in ID states versus not stop in ID states.
Yeah, this gives whoever just pulled you over a free pass to see if you are a citizen or not. They don't have to ask. They don't have to challenge it. You can't challenge it because they have your license to look at it now. And if due process is gone, guess what? You're toast. You have no shot to do anything. You're just gone.
And again, I want to highlight this. Zachary, in this exact case that you're talking about, right? They could still pull you over, right?
Mhm.
They could still pull you over. They could look at your ID. You could be determined to be an illegal citizen or like an illegal alien, right? You're in the country illegally, whatever. You could then drive away from the cops, hit 16 kids on the sidewalk, and then get arrested and go to prison. Guess what? You are still entitled due process. You are still entitled due process to be brought in front of a judge and determined whether you are guilty or innocent. That is not for somebody else to determine immediately. You have to go through that process. That is afforded to anyone in the United States in any criminal proceeding. That is the law. That is what is established in the United States, and that is how it should be. Again, is it horrific that that person just drove away from the cops and ran over 16 kids? Absolutely. Absolutely it is. But guess what? They are still afforded due process, just like Jeffrey Dahmer was. Just like any guy who pickpockets an old lady on the street is. Doesn't matter if it's a misdemeanor, doesn't matter if it's a felony. You are entitled due process. Because you never know when your identical twin could commit a crime and that other twin could get just, I don't know, brought into police custody and immediately thrown in jail and prison and never to be heard from again, while the identical twin who did the crime gets away scot-free because you didn't do the actual due diligence to make sure that you were putting the right person away, that you were doing the right things, that you made sure that this person violated the law and in our cases was convicted by a jury of his or her peers. You have to do these things to prevent innocent people as best as you can from going to prison or from being deported in this case, because there is no guarantee. There's no guarantee that at some point that an American citizen who cannot prove their citizenship at the time gets deported to a country that they do not belong to. And as of right now, we're seeing that if that happens, you are shit out of luck. You're shit out of luck
Mhm.
because suddenly nobody wants to bring you back anywhere because nobody knows where the hell you came from. And that should be ringing alarm bells in everyone's head because it's all fun and games until it happens to you or someone you know or someone you love. Then suddenly it's a problem. Fun fact, it should be a problem always because it could happen at any time. It's not likely, don't get me wrong. But do you want to take the chance? I don't. So,
Yeah, and there's
on that fun note,
a reason these laws have existed and have been relatively unchallenged through history. Like, it's a pretty common sense thing that due process is a thing. It just is. You don't want somebody here? Prove it in court. You want to put them in prison for the crimes they did? Prove it in court. That is that's how that works. It is a
have you
slippery
heard the term
slope.
innocent until proven
Yeah,
guilty?
exactly. It's a slippery slope to start doing this now. Once, if they happen to get away with it once, who's to say they don't keep doing it? Or somebody else decides, look, we don't have to do this anymore. So let's just start putting people in jail for whatever we want. Like,
And 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 I want to bring this up. I want to cover this before we we end up eventually wrapping this segment up. I mean, Donald Trump was caught on a hot mic. This again is something that he said, but he was talking to Bukele and he said homegrowns are next. Homegrowns are next, which means that he is saying that individuals who are in the United States as prisoners, whether they're citizens or not, they are homegrown criminals, which again, they can be criminals. They still need to be held by the United States. They violated our laws. That doesn't mean you get to just deport them to another country because they're a criminal. That's not how it works. And he said that he needs to build about 5 more of those super complexes that we were talking about. That's that. I mean, again, alarm
and
bells.
and the fact that the president of El Salvador is on board with this is a whole other thing. But also kind of helps explain why we're getting no information from the prison where these folks have been sent to now, uh, and that only certain people are allowed in. Like, there's a lot of, and this might be just a my opinion thing, but there's a lot of people testing the waters, trying to see what they can get away with, trying to figure out where the line is.
Yep.
For whatever future things they may want to try, may want to do, see what they need to challenge, anything like that. Where is the line? And this, whatever ends up happening here, I think kind of sets the precedent for, uh, at least the next few years, at the very
Mhm.
least.
Well, and obviously people are calling the 2026 midterm elections and then eventual 2028 presidential elections into question already. But I'm not even going to go there. I'm just going to say, let's say the elections go perfectly fine. Um, would you, if you're on Donald Trump's side in this case, would you? And I'm looking directly at the camera, looking directly at you. Would you be okay if a Democrat was doing the exact same thing to you, to your family, to your friends? What if they decided that because you were a MAGA supporter, that they were going to deport you to a different country, to a supermax prison, full stop. You wouldn't like that.
And it's, as we've
You
seen, it's
shouldn't like that.
as simple as maybe you had
Snatch and
contact
grab.
or were friends with somebody who turned out to be a murderer or somebody who killed someone. They can be like, oh, they were affiliated with this person, so they're probably bad too. Bye bye.
Exactly. And until and unless you can defend yourself in court and prove to the contrary, there's nothing to say that you're not affiliated with them. You can scream to the moon that you're not, but until you can find a way to liberate yourself in a court of law, you're screwed. And I don't think you want that. I don't think anybody wants that. Nobody should want that. But clearly, the administration is using this as a means to an end, and it is deeply troubling. And we can't have our blinders on to this. So this is going to get us both put on a watch list.
That's fine. They're gonna get real bored real
Dude,
fast.
I was about to say, when I come back from the UK, I'm toast.
Good luck coming back.
Yeah, I'll let you know. But anyways, you want to wrap it up on something lighthearted and fun because we're about at time. We really flew through an hour there.
Yeah. Hold on a second. I got this.
Okay.
Because I am who I am. That's not what I wanted.
You are.
What time is it? 9:00. I will wager for the next half hour to 45 minutes or so.
I know what you're talking about.
The Reds are above 500. Enjoy it while it lasts, because it may not last long.
That's not even what I thought you were going to talk about. I thought you were going to talk about the potential for lights.
Oh yeah, Northern Lights tonight, maybe too. That's the thing too.
Hey, it's at least 5-3 for the Reds.
It is true. They scored. They're bringing it back, but they're running out of time.
That's 2 innings and a dream, baby.
I'd say that's all we need, but I'd like 4 or 5 innings in a dream, personally.
I mean, personally, I would like another 9. Can we start over?
True.
I wasn't ready yet.
Oh, yeah, Northern Lights tonight, if you have clear skies and are probably in the northern third of the U.S. It's not a particularly strong storm, so the lights aren't going to be visible too far south, most likely. Space weather prediction is a whole other kind of beast and is pretty often wrong.
With cuts to NOAA, and that is going to potentially get more difficult.
Don't even get me started on that, chef.
That can be your episode next week, depending on what happens. And I also want to preface that, and I want to throw this as a quick tidbit at the end. There is supposedly a decision on the Insurrection Act that is going to be released by the president on the 20th. There was an executive order stated or signed when Trump took office that he wanted a full report on the potential to enact the Insurrection Act. And that was from 90 days of the executive order signing, and that will be on the 20th of April. That'll be 90 days. So just wanted to throw that out there, something that we will probably keep on the back burner of our minds on whether or not to cover it next week. So stay tuned for that. Outside of that, though, we appreciate you so much for tuning in and listening to another episode of the Neutral News Network. Again, we do our best to stay as neutral as possible here. But we obviously do have our opinions on what we think is right and wrong. And we do our best to also, prescribe facts to our opinions and our feelings and things like that, while trying to keep it as neutral as possible. So we appreciate you all for tuning in. Make sure to like, share. We're also live streaming now on Facebook, so feel free to follow us there and share it with your friends and family there as well. And outside of that, we hope you have a wonderful rest of the week.